Hello there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on wherever that you are there right now and you're watching this. In this session, we're going to talk about AWS Fargate. And if you're wondering what that is, well, AWS Fargate is a technology that allows you to run with containers without actually having to manage servers or clusters. So for example, you could use AWS Fargate for Amazon ECS, a managed container orchestration service in AWS, that supports Docker containers. And we've always stated this, that we wanted to take the undifferentiated heavy lifting away from customers and have you focus on your core business. And this is just one more example in helping doing just that. Now, for attendees of this session, the assumption is that you already have some level of basic understanding and working knowledge of containers, like Dockers, for example. Now, by way of introduction, my name is Shantanu Dutt, and I've been on board AWS for a little over 7 years now. It's been a fantastic journey for me, starting off as a solutions architect back then, and then now I run the solutions architecture teams for parts of ASEAN. And a major part of my team's day job is to really help customers with their architecture of their workloads on the AWS platform. And one of the things that I've been excited about right from day one for all these 7 years is the variety of use cases that customers like you around the world have, and how we as a team help you solve technology and business problems, including use cases around microservices and containers. Oh, by the way, that is my Twitter handle there as well. So in case you want to connect with me or have a comment about my presentation today, and you would like to tweet, then happy to connect with you there. So just a recap of why Fargate and how we got here. It has actually been a journey, and some of you who have been following this for the past 2 to 3 years might be aware. It was just about 3.5 years ago, November 2014, that we were announcing the release of Amazon Elastic Container Service, also called as Amazon ECS. Now, we launched ECS because our customers needed a way to manage and scale the deployment of Docker containers on AWS. Our customers wanted a managed service where they didn't have to operate their own cluster management software, a solution that was scalable and secure, that they could trust to run their production workloads, and they wanted tight integration and support for EC2 features that they liked. Then in 2015, we focused on building a highly reliable and performant Docker image registry that we call Amazon Elastic Container Registry, or ECR. And we announced the general availability release near the end of 2015. Our goal with ECR was to enable developers to use the same familiar Docker push and pull APIs to store their container images. And we see this product highly adopted by customers both running containers in AWS and really across any environment for that matter. In the last couple of years, we've seen great adoption of production use cases on Amazon ECS. Our active customers are actually up by more than 450% since 2016. So we're managing containers across millions of instances every single month. In fact, we are witnessing an incredible transition to containers, and customers of ECS, whether it's Expedia running its travel platform or Mapbox, powering mapping data for some of the most popular websites. Amazon ECS enables these customers to be able to run containers at high scale. And indeed, we see hundreds and millions of containers launched every single week. Customers, that is each of you, are critical key to our innovation. We love to listen to our customers, understand your use cases, learn, use those ideas to fuel our experimentation, and then find ways to then build innovative new features to solve the problems and challenges we are hearing about. We get those features in your hands, and then that flywheel spins back again with new feedback, ideas, use cases, etc. That is pretty much how we've built all our services and features throughout our history, and this same process has helped us to deliver over 50 new features to the ECS service and the stack since 2014-15. Now, one of the most prominent things we have heard from our ECS customers is that you would love to not only have, you would love to only have to think about the container or the application and really not have to manage any of the underlying EC2 infrastructure. So we took this feedback and we've worked hard to build a technology that allows customers to focus entirely on their applications and work with their applications directly at the container or the task level. We have over the years worked on making virtual machine instances on the cloud as a very basic compute primitive And now it means we are making even containers a fundamental compute primitive. And that brought us to AWS Fargate. And we announced the launch of this at our reInvent 2017 towards the end of November, if you remember, which is to run containers without the need to manage underlying infrastructure. Fargate allows you to work entirely with an ECS Task Native API. And with Fargate, you specify the container image, CPU, memory required to run the container in an ECS Task Definition. And with a single command, literally, you can run that container in production. And with one command, you can scale that to tens, hundreds, or even thousands based on your requirements. With Fargate, 1, you have no instances to manage, so no more patching OS or runtimes. 2, with the new Task Native API, you don't need to worry about clusters. There as an organizational and security boundary there, but you really don't need to think about cluster utilization or auto-scaling of compute resources within that cluster boundary. With a resource-based pricing model, you only pay for the resources you provision for each task. So we think of Fargate fundamentally how Fargate basically changes how you think about consumption, how you will run and deploy your applications with containers. And as I stated at the beginning of my presentation, it takes away that undifferentiated heavy lifting of managing infrastructure, which is servers and clusters. Now, AWS Fargate is designed to be used with Amazon ECS, the core API, scheduling, and placement concepts remaining the same, and you can continue to benefit from investments we have made there over the past 3 years with access to the same rich set of features and capabilities to run in production and run it at scale. That's important. Oh, and by the way, if you're wondering as to why I'm talking about ECS, what about Kubernetes? This is important because, amongst other reasons, more than 60% of Kubernetes workloads run on AWS as of early 2017 based on surveys. So we absolutely plan to extend AWS Fargate to support Amazon Elastic Kubernetes Service, our fully managed Kubernetes offering, sometime through 2018. So would you like to learn more about AWS Fargate then? I'm sure you do. So let's get under the hood in details. So we'll discuss some of the use cases of Fargate, how it works, show a quick demo, and then visit some of the key product areas. Fargate really addresses the breadth for how containers are deployed today, but don't really want to manage the underlying infrastructure. For example, by definition, microservices are independently deployable services that work together, and it's modeled around a business domain. What a platform like ECS does, and Fargate enables you to even further do, is let the developers working on these independent services be able to choose the deployment cadence and scaling requirements without any additional infrastructure considerations at all. So if you're running batch jobs, you may be running them for short durations or on an intermittent basis to perform lots of computation, unlike, let's say, websites or e-commerce stores, or for other long-standing services. You don't have to stand up and scale capacity ahead of such a job. And lastly, containers are an excellent way that we see many customers following to be able to port their applications between not only their environments like dev and prod and across in a consistent manner, but also from their on-prem to cloud environments. So if you're migrating workloads by using containerization, Fargate maintains that focus on containers as a very simple primitive. Now, getting started with containers is rather easy. You could even spin up one locally without much effort at all. Or if you really want to run containers in the cloud, you could actually spin up some EC2 instances, launch containers on them, and get going in minutes. This would work even if you're using dozens of containers. But as you start to think about scaling this, managing hundreds of such instances, monitoring their health, scaling, and then launching your containers on them, and the entire gamut and the whole life cycle around them, how do you actually scale for that? It's tough. So let's say you plan to run several highly available applications across 3 different availability zones in a region. ECS enables you to be able to operationalize your containerized workloads at very high scales. No management software to install or worry about, it's high availability. The cluster management piece enabled you to monitor the cluster, scale it using auto-scaling groups, and be able to manage state of the instances in that cluster. The placement engine enables you to be able to set rules to target landing your containers on the right instances based on your own preferences. And then finally, the advanced scheduling features help maintain the desired state of that application, spawn new containers to automatically respond to scaling needs, and maintain resiliency by deploying across multiple availability zones, while at the same time being resource aware of the underlying compute. So if you actually look at the instances, if you actually double click down, it actually reveals that there's additional supporting software that you need to run, maintain, patch on all your virtual machines to support your containers like the Docker agent and the ECS agent. So the real picture looked something like this. And there are these additional layers of management you need to be aware of when all you wanted to do was run containers. So Fargate really supports for ECS, enables you to do just that, a fully managed orchestration as well as data plane experience, bringing your focus to only those containers. So let's talk about how to use Fargate with ECS. You want to think about Fargate as a technology and not really a different service per se when using it with ECS. That is, no new APIs to learn as such. Now here's a screenshot of ECS when you define an application called a task definition. You are actually presented with an option to select compatibilities with a launch type. Fargate is just a launch type. If you want to run your containers on the EC2 instances registered with your ECS cluster, that is the EC2 launch type, that's another option as well. So you continue to define your applications as you do for ECS today and use the same set of APIs. Running containers as Fargate on EC2 or even EC2 launch type is really a launch type decision. So there's no additional plugin required as such to be added to run your containers as Fargate. And because you continue to leverage the same constructs and APIs, not only is your migration between EC2 and Fargate very easy, but you can run a Fargateized service and one that runs on your EC2 instances side by side within that same cluster, no problem at all. So you can get the flexibility in picking the launch type for your purposes without actually breaking the model of co-location of your different applications. So let's actually look at how one does this. Let's actually walk through a demo to actually show you a screencast video that I've recorded to see what it takes to set this up. So let's start with this. So we'll start with creating a cluster. As you can see that there are various templates. We'll create a new one anyway. We'll call it Flask Demo cluster, and then once you create it, there are certain parameters that we'll define. Very simple to do. There are two launch types. As we mentioned, we'll choose the Fargate launch type because that's what this demo is about. We'll choose a couple of tasks under the service. There's a VPC configuration which all of you should be aware of. We'll just select an existing one to make it easier, and then we'll configure the application load balancer. We have one existing here as well, and we'll configure the different parameters of the ALB as well. We will then configure an auto scaling group to sort of add and remove tasks automatically to match scaling demands. We'll put in a policy there, and then once we move to the next step, we'll actually review the configuration and create this new service. And as you can see, it's creating all of this in the background automatically, and very soon we should have a service with Fargate launch type up and running in no time. There you are. You can see all the configuration settings there. If we click on individually on some of them, it will actually show you the differences. The group name, the VPC ID, this obviously load balanced under the application load balancer. It shows the tasks as well, one of them provisioning, one of them that's already running. It shows the security group rules and what are the rules and the inbound ports that have been opened. So let's actually look at the DNS link for this very quickly to see the hello Fargate world message that I've put in. So now that the application load balancer is up and running, we will go to the link, just put it in the browser, and there you go. That's just a small hello world message I've put in. And this is important. We had two launch types. As you can see, they can coexist with a domain namespace separating them, and you can have the EC2 and Fargate type clusters or the services under the same cluster running with no problem at all. If I actually go to one of the tasks, you can see the tasks running under both the EC2 and Fargate type, and they are distinctly shown there as well, which means you can manage them from there on. So that was a simple demonstration of launching an ECS cluster with Fargate. Hope that was useful. Now let's look at what we looked at the demo. We will visit some of the key product areas. We will begin with the networking portion. In the Fargate model, even though there is no instances that you actually manage, each task gets its own dedicated elastic network interface, or an ENI as we call it, in a separate network namespace. This is a recently launched task called as networking mode, called AWS VPC mode, and is the default way of running your Fargate tasks with ECS. It provides the required separation of responsibility, where you as a user don't really have to worry about the underlying infrastructure as yet, and yet you actually retain full control of networking policies for your applications via security groups, as well as get powerful ENI capabilities such as flow logs. And as you can see, the public IP addresses are supported. So you get a public IP for tasks in subnet 1 and 3 right here in the diagram. We see customers take advantage of the capabilities of the application load balancer and the recently launched network load balancer as well. You continue to use them the way ECS provides the integration today. And in Fargate's case, you only register the IPs belonging to your tasks with the load balancers as we saw in the demo. So we talked about how the network security using VPC security group rules enforces network access. Let's talk further. Let's talk about the other security aspects. We will start with the level of isolation and how you could think about it when planning your clusters at the beginning. So you can continue to use the notion of a cluster when using Fargate with ECS. With Fargate, even though there are no EC2 instances to run, a cluster is an entity to provide logical isolation of that namespace. And so in ECS with EC2, your container instances are registered with a cluster and your tasks are running on shared infrastructure. Similarly, your Fargate tasks in the production cluster may share the same underlying infrastructure as other tasks within that same cluster. But the notification application in prod will never share the infrastructure with any other tasks from dev, QA, or the beta clusters. There are permissions you can control at 3 distinct and different layers when it comes to managing your Fargate environment. The ECS cluster level permissions enable you to control which user can run applications in the cluster. So if you really have the same set of applications running dev and prod, you can separate the user permissions based on the environment they should have access to. Then secondly, you have these AWS resources like simple storage, our simple storage service, the buckets for S3, or our DynamoDB tables that need to be accessed as an IAM user. The task IAM role runs your containers as an IAM user, so you can actually access these resources very easily. Lastly, you can give ECS the ability to perform certain actions like your task, like send logs to CloudWatch or pull ECR images. We call the role to perform these actions a task execution role. All these permissions apply to both EC2 as well as the Fargate launch types. Now you can run your containers very easily with no infrastructure management involved, but where do you actually store the final images? So Amazon ECR is a fully managed, highly available registry with a global footprint for your container images. The additional capabilities that have been built with Fargate via task execution role really enables us to provide seamless authentication to be able to pull those images from ECR. Similarly, if you're actually using a public repository like Docker Hub, you can actually continue to do so without any changes. We do plan to support and add support for third-party private repositories over time. Now, what kind of visibility and monitoring can one have to this? Well, all application logs are sent to CloudWatch logs and CloudWatch events available in your AWS account. In addition, when you want to set up scaling rules for your services, you can actually monitor the service CPU and service memory utilization very easily. And lastly, what's the cost for running all of this? So let's look at how pricing and configuration works for Fargate. Running the ECS orchestration in itself continues to be at no additional charge at all. You only pay for what you request at the task level. Here, we have identified task level CPU and memory at 1 vCPU and 3 GB respectively. So you get what you define at the task level, and are charged on a per second basis and only for the time your task is in actual use. The billing is on a per second granularity, and you configure and pay for the task level dimensions independently. So in other words, you pay per CPU second and per GB second for memory. So here are the various configurations that are supported today with AWS Fargate. As you can see, you can have from 2 GB per vCPU to generally up to 8 GB per vCPU for the various configurations that we have today. So match your workload requirements closely, whether they are general purpose, compute intensive, or even memory optimized. The choice is yours and the choices are broad. And finally, talking about SLAs. Remember, we have service level agreements for our core AWS building block services like our Elastic Compute Service and our Elastic Block Storage. So here we are actually extending the compute service level agreement to include ECS and Fargate, and that stands at 99.99% for that service for the region. Now many customers have this question: with Fargate and EC2 launch types available, which one should I actually pick for my workloads? Or if one way to say it differently, I like the simplicity of Fargate, but when should I actually consider using the EC2 launch type, right? How do you sort of differentiate that? And the answer to that is that Fargate and EC2 launch types are compatible with each other in the sense that you can continue to use not only the same primitives as discussed earlier, but also run within the same cluster boundary. And we saw in the demo earlier as well that there were 2 separate clusters running, one each with Fargate and one with EC2. So you continue to define your applications as you do for ECS today, and you use the same APIs. Running containers as Fargate or EC2 is really a launch time decision. There's no additional plugin to be added to your containers as Fargate. And because you continue to leverage the same constructs and APIs, not only is your migration between EC2 and Fargate easy, but you can run a Fargateized service and one that runs on your EC2 instances side by side within that same cluster. So you'll get the flexibility in picking the launch type for your purposes without actually breaking the model of co-location of your applications. So if you have use cases that you need to roll your own version of the Amazon machine images, or you would like to add something, some accompanying software that cannot run as a container in your task definition, you should look to use the EC2 launch type option as well. Say, for example, you have this e-commerce site with different requirements for the shopping cart, or let's just say the notifications app team would like to be able to move to Fargate, but they have a different timeline which they plan to do so. So Fargate clusters are heterogeneous. You can actually run the web app as an ECS service with launch type as Fargate, and you can only see your tasks across the various subnets and availability zones. You can continue to run the shopping cart and notifications app as EC2 launch types within the same cluster as the Fargate powered web app, and the network boundaries thereby applying uniform set of policies in terms of IAM permissions as well as network access rules. So this is not just a one-way door when you choose to run your containers on Fargate, or vice versa the other way around. Here's just a snapshot of some of our early adopter customers. As you can see very clearly, it's a mix of customers like Expedia to Autodesk to AdRoll, a disparate set of customers from varied industry. We can only obviously talk about the ones that are publicly referenceable customers, but I can assure you there are several other customers as well running ECS in either EC2 or Fargate mode. And as we continue to launch this in more AWS regions, we are going to see an increased adoption amongst our customers as they've obviously shown interest in using Fargate, including the customer base that we have with ECS today. Here are our partners that we've worked with to enable integrations around security and visibility. You might recognize many of them and may also be using some of their products and services. And as has been the case in the past, we will continue to integrate across our rich expanding partner ecosystem over time and take feedback from you for additions. So if you want to get started, you could actually start with visiting our main page on our website at aws.amazon.com/Fargate, and you will find all the needful info that you get from that page, and then move on from there for documentation as well as other things. To gain more confidence and hands-on experience with AWS, you can access the digital training built by the AWS experts. You could also attend our instructor-led classes by qualified AWS instructors, and you can learn how to design, deploy, and operate highly available, cost-effective, and secure applications on AWS. And then you could validate your technical expertise with AWS and use practice exams to help you prepare for your AWS certifications. Now, AWS also has a wide partner ecosystem to help you focus on your success and take full advantage of all the business benefits that AWS has to offer. So learn more about our partner ecosystem from the AWS Partner Ecosystem website that we have, and you will find the right APN partner needs when you visit our AWS APN booth at our showcase. Finally, I'd like to thank you for attending the session. I hope you found it useful and interesting. And for now, do provide us with your feedback and valuable suggestions for us to improve in future events. So we're excited to get our Fargate service to you, and we always love to hear feedback from our customers. Bye-bye for now. Cheers.